Hey fellas, my life was pretty normal, happy even, until a couple of weeks ago when something strange happened and I haven't been able to shake it since. It started innocently enough. Kate, my wife, and I were sitting on the couch scrolling through photos from our last trip. We had gone to the mountains, taken some amazing shots, and were reminiscing about how great it was. Then we got to this one picture. Just a simple photo of us having dinner at home. But something in the background caught my eye. There was a reflection in the window, a man's reflection. I stared at it for a moment, trying to figure out who it could be. I laughed nervously and said, "Who's that guy with us at dinner, Kate? Got a secret guest I didn't know about?" Kate's reaction was immediate and a little too much. She let out this forced laugh, brushed her hair behind her ear, and said, "Oh, that's probably someone outside on the street. You know how reflections can be weird. Don't worry about it." Something about her answer didn't sit right with me. Uh, it wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Her voice had that shaky edge, like she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. I let it go in the moment, but I couldn't forget it. That reflection stayed with me, burning in the back of my mind. Am I crazy for being suspicious over something so small? I don't know, maybe it's nothing, but something about it just feels off. After that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Kate's nervous laugh, her quick dismissal, it all lingered in my mind. I told myself I was overthinking it, that it was just a trick of the light or a weird angle in the photo. But then the little things started piling up, and they were impossible to ignore. Kate started leaving the house more often. She'd say she had late meetings at work or needed to grab coffee with a friend, but it felt like these meetings were happening more frequently than before. She'd come home looking flustered but would brush it off with a quick excuse. "Oh, it was just a busy day," she'd say with a tight smile. One evening, I was sitting on the couch while Kate was in the kitchen on the phone. Her voice was quieter than usual, like she didn't want me to overhear. I couldn't make out much, just a few murmured phrases, but the tone felt intimate, like she was talking to someone she trusted more than me. What really set me off, though, was when I caught another glimpse of that shadow. I was passing through the living room and happened to glance at the large mirror on the wall. Kate was still on the phone, and for a split second I saw it again. A faint, blurry outline of a man standing behind her. When I turned around, there was no one there. But the reflection, it was unmistakable. "Who was that on the phone?" I asked her casually when she hung up. She hesitated, her eyes darting away before she answered. "Just a colleague. We're working on a new project and I needed to run something by him." Her tone was too even, too rehearsed, and the way she said him sent a chill down my spine. I didn't push her on it, but the seed of doubt had firmly taken root. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, my mind was racing. What was going on? Who was this shadow I kept seeing? And why was Kate acting so strange? I wanted to confront her, but I didn't have enough proof. Just a bunch of suspicions and weird reflections in mirrors. Am I losing it, or is something actually happening here? I don't know yet, but I can't ignore it. Something isn't right. Before I dive further into what's been happening, I think it's important to give some context about how Kate and I met and what our life has been like. Maybe it'll help explain why all of this feels so surreal to me. We met 6 years ago on a dating site. I wasn't expecting much. I'd just gotten out of a long-term relationship and wasn't looking for anything serious. But Kate's profile caught my attention right away. Her photos were stunning, and her bio was witty and confident. She seemed like someone who knew exactly what she wanted out of life. We hit it off immediately. Our first date was at a little coffee shop downtown, and I remember being blown away by how easy she was to talk to. She was charming, funny, and had this spark that made you feel like the most important person in the room. By the end of that night, I knew I wanted to see her again. Things moved quickly after that. Within a year, we were living together, and 2 years later, we got married. Our wedding was small but perfect, just close friends and family in a beautiful garden setting. At the time, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Kate was my best friend, my partner, my everything. We settled into a comfortable life. I work as a graphic designer from home, which gave me plenty of time to focus on our house and hobbies. Kate works in marketing for a large firm, which means she's out of the house a lot. That used to be fine. She'd always made time for us, and I trusted her completely. For the most part, our relationship felt solid. Sure, we had our arguments like any couple, but nothing major. We'd talk things out, make up, and move on. At least that's how it used to be. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder when things started to shift. Was it gradual, or did I just miss the signs altogether? The Kate I married was someone I believed in, someone I could lean on. But lately, she feels like a stranger. And this whole thing with the shadows and the phone calls, it's making me question everything I thought I knew about her and about us. I can't shake the feeling that there's more going on here than she's letting on. And if I'm being honest, I'm scared to find out what it is. After weeks of unease, I decided I couldn't just sit around wondering anymore. If something was going on, I needed proof. The shadows, the nervous laughter, the phone calls. It all pointed to something bigger, and I wasn't going to let it go unnoticed any longer. My first move was to keep an eye on the mirrors around the house. I don't know how crazy that sounds, but every time I caught a glimpse of that shadow, it was in a reflection. I started paying more attention when Kate was home, trying to spot anything unusual. But no matter how much I watched, I could only see the shadow when she was in the room. If she wasn't around, the mirrors were perfectly normal. One night, when Kate had fallen asleep, I decided to check her phone. I know, it's a huge invasion of privacy, but at this point, I was desperate. If there was nothing to find, I'd deal with the guilt later. But if there was something, well, I needed to know. I unlocked her phone and started going through her messages. To my surprise, there wasn't anything out of the ordinary. No suspicious texts, no flirty exchanges, nothing that screamed infidelity. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe I really was imagining things. But then I checked her photo gallery. That's when I saw it. There was a photo of Kate standing in front of the full-length mirror in our bedroom. She was smiling, holding up her phone to take a selfie. At first glance, it looked like any other picture, but when I looked closer, my stomach dropped. Behind her, reflected in the mirror, was the shadow of a man. His features were blurry, but his outline was clear enough to make my skin crawl. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, my mind racing. Who was he? Why was he there? And more importantly, why was Kate so comfortable taking a picture with him standing behind her? It wasn't just the reflection anymore. This was proof that something wasn't right. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to act normal around her. She noticed immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "You've been acting strange lately." I forced a smile and shrugged. "Just tired," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. But inside, I was anything but calm. That photo had confirmed what I'd been suspecting all along. There was someone else. And now, I had to figure out how to confront her without letting her know how much this was tearing me apart. I couldn't keep the questions bottled up anymore. That photo haunted me. Every time I looked at Kate, all I could see was her standing in front of that mirror, smiling, while some shadowy figure loomed behind her. I needed answers, and I needed them now. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to confront her. My heart was racing, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Kate," I started, setting down my fork, "who is the man in the mirrors?" Her reaction was immediate. She froze, her hand halfway to her glass of wine. "What are you talking about?" she asked, laughing nervously. But her laugh was too forced, too fake. I didn't let her dodge the question. "I've seen him, Kate, in the mirrors and the photos. There's a man. Who is he?" Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might finally come clean. But instead she shook her head and rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous," she said, her voice sharp. "There's no man. You're imagining things." "Imagining things," I repeated. My phone opened the photo I'd found and slid it across the table to her. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo I'd found, and slid it across the table to her. "Explain this." Kate picked up the phone, her hands trembling slightly. She stared at the picture for a long moment before looking back at me. "It's a trick of the light," she said, her tone defensive. "Reflections can be weird sometimes. You're overthinking this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even with undeniable proof staring her in the face, she was still trying to lie her way out of it. "A trick of the light," I said, my voice rising. "Kate, I've seen him with my own eyes. Every time you're around, he's there. What the hell is going on?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this," she snapped. "You're paranoid, Jake. Maybe you should focus on fixing whatever's wrong with you instead of accusing me of things that don't exist." Her words hit me like a slap. I wanted to yell, to demand the truth, but the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't guilt, it was fear. She was scared, and I couldn't tell if it was because she was hiding something or because she genuinely thought I was losing my mind. As she stormed out of the room, I sat there in silence, staring at the photo on my phone. Her reaction only confirmed what I already knew. Something was going on, and if she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd have to find it myself. After Kate's outburst, I knew I had to take things into my own hands. She wasn't going to admit anything, and her constant deflections only made me more determined to uncover the truth. That's when I got the idea to set up hidden cameras around the apartment. I ordered a few small, discreet cameras online, the kind you can hide in plain sight. They arrived within a couple of days, and I wasted no time installing them. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one in our bedroom, all positioned to capture the mirrors. If this man was real, I was going to catch him. For the next few days, I acted normal around Kate, pretending like our confrontation had never happened. She seemed to relax, maybe thinking she'd successfully convinced me that I was imagining things, but I kept my distance emotionally, pouring all my energy into monitoring the cameras. At first, the footage didn't show much, just Kate going about her day, cooking dinner, working on her laptop. But then I started to notice something. Whenever Kate was alone in a room with a mirror, she wasn't really alone. The cameras didn't capture the shadow directly, but the way she behaved was strange. She'd sit in the living room, staring at the mirror for long stretches of time, almost as if she were talking to someone. Her lips would move, but there was no sound. She'd smile occasionally, tilt her head, even laugh softly. It was like she was having a conversation with someone I couldn't see. One evening, after she'd gone to bed, I reviewed the footage from earlier that day. My heart stopped when I saw her standing in front of the bedroom mirror, holding her phone like she was taking a selfie. But there was no reflection of her phone in the mirror. Instead, the reflection showed her hand extended, as if she were reaching out to someone. I rewound the footage and watched it again, hoping I'd missed something or that it was a glitch, but it was the same every time. Her reflection didn't match her movements, and it sent a chill down my spine. What's worse, there was a moment where she stepped away from the mirror, but her reflection didn't. It stayed there for a split second longer than it should have before vanishing. I couldn't explain it. I didn't even want to try. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the footage in my mind, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Was it some kind of trick? A glitch in the camera? Or was there really someone or something else in that mirror? I was no closer to understanding what was happening, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was something much darker. The moment I saw that footage, I knew there was no coming back from this. I couldn't stay in that house. Couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. Whatever was happening with Kate, whether it was another man, something supernatural, or my own mind playing tricks on me, it was tearing me apart. I had to get out. The next morning, I sat Kate down in the living room. She seemed wary, her eyes scanning my face like she was trying to read my thoughts. "What is it now, Jake?" she asked, her tone sharp. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice calm. "Kate, I don't know what's going on, but I can't live like this anymore. I've given you every chance to explain, and all you've done is lie and deflect. I'm done." Her face twisted with anger and disbelief. "You're breaking up with me over some stupid shadows? Do you even hear yourself? This isn't just about shadows, Kate," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "This is about trust, or the complete lack of it. You've been hiding something from me, and I can't keep pretending that everything's fine. I'm leaving." Her anger quickly shifted to desperation. "Jake, please," she said, her voice breaking. "You're not thinking clearly. You're imagining things. There's nothing going on. This is all in your head." I shook my head, standing up. She reached over and took my hand. Her hand was warm, which made me feel even worse. "I've seen the footage, Kate. I've seen the way you act when you think no one's watching. You're talking to someone or something, and I can't do this anymore." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she was going to confess, but instead she started crying, shaking her head over and over. "You're crazy," she whispered. "You're making things up that don't exist. You're throwing everything away for nothing." I wanted to feel angry, but all I felt was numb. Her tears didn't move me anymore. Her words, her denials, they were just noise. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing my things. She followed me, pleading with me to stay. Jake, please don't do this, she begged. We can fix this. Whatever you think you saw, it's not real. Just stay. Let's talk about this. I zipped up my suitcase and turned to face her. There's nothing left to talk about, Kate. You've been lying to me for months, and whether it's about another man or something else, I don't care anymore. I'm done. Her face crumpled and she sank onto the bed, sobbing into her hands. But I didn't let myself feel anything. I couldn't. I grabbed my suitcase, walked out the door, and didn't look back. As I drove away, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, sadness, anger, and confusion. I didn't know what was real anymore, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't live in that house with Kate and her secrets. After leaving Kate, I thought the worst was behind me. But it wasn't. The shadows followed me, haunting every reflection in my new apartment. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, that it was the stress of the breakup messing with my head. But the more I tried to ignore them, the more persistent they became. I'd catch glimpses of them in the bathroom mirror, in the reflection of my TV screen, even in the windows at night. Always faint, always out of focus, but undeniably there. It was like the shadow had followed me. Even after I'd left Kate behind, I couldn't escape it. One night, after yet another sleepless evening of staring at the ceiling, I decided I couldn't handle it alone anymore. Whatever was happening, whether it was real or not, I needed help. The next morning, I made an appointment with a psychiatrist. Sitting in the doctor's office was surreal. I felt ridiculous explaining what had been happening. I keep seeing these shadows, I said hesitantly, in mirrors, in reflections. It started when I was still with my wife, but now it's everywhere. The psychiatrist listened patiently, nodding as I spoke. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly, her expression calm but serious. What you're describing sounds like it could be stress-induced hallucinations, she said. These kinds of symptoms can sometimes occur after traumatic events like a breakup or betrayal. Your mind might be projecting your fears and anxieties into physical forms. Hallucinations? I repeated, my stomach sinking. So you're saying this is all in my head? Not exactly, she said gently. Your experiences are real to you, but they might not have an external cause. It's your brain's way of processing overwhelming emotions. Therapy and stress management techniques could help. In some cases, medication might be beneficial. Her words were both a relief and a blow. Fixation on witnessing things? I asked her. Her words were both a relief and a blow. On one hand, it meant there wasn't some supernatural force or a man hiding in the mirrors. On the other hand, it meant the shadows were a reflection of my own broken state of mind. Was I really that damaged? I agreed to start therapy and left the office feeling a mix of hope and despair. Part of me wanted to believe the psychiatrist was right, that the shadows were just a product of my imagination. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something I might never fully understand. For now, though, I decided to focus on healing. If the shadows were tied to my stress, maybe working through my feelings about Kate and the betrayal would make them go away. It wasn't much, but it was a place to start. Therapy was harder than I expected. Each session forced me to confront emotions I'd buried deep: the betrayal, the mistrust, the anger, and the lingering doubt about whether I'd made the right decisions. My therapist helped me unravel everything, but it wasn't a quick or easy process. One of the hardest parts was coming to terms with the possibility that I'd been wrong about Kate. The shadows, the photo, her strange behavior. Had it all been in my head? Had I destroyed my marriage because of something I'd imagined? It was a question I couldn't avoid, no matter how much I wanted to. During one session, my therapist asked me a question that stuck with me. What would it mean if the shadows weren't real? Would that change how you feel about Kate? At first, I didn't know how to answer. If the shadows were hallucinations, then Kate wasn't lying about that. But what about everything else? Her nervous laughter, her secrecy, her refusal to explain the photo. Even if the shadows weren't real, there were still so many unanswered questions. But the thought that I might have accused her unfairly weighed heavily on me. But so did the memory of her deflections and excuses. I started to wonder if the truth even mattered anymore. Whether she had been cheating or not, the trust between us had been shattered. Every moment of doubt, every lie, real or imagined, had built a wall between us that felt impossible to tear down. As the weeks went by, the shadows began to fade. They didn't disappear overnight, but they appeared less often, less vividly. My therapist said it was a sign that I was starting to heal, that the stress and anxiety fueling the hallucinations were finally easing. It should have been a relief, but instead, it left me feeling empty. If the shadows were gone, then what was left? Had I destroyed my marriage over something that wasn't real? Or had I walked away from a toxic relationship that was never meant to last? I didn't know. And the not knowing was the hardest part of all. One night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I found myself scrolling through old photos of Kate and me. We looked so happy, so in love. I wondered if that version of us had ever really existed, or if it had been an illusion, just like the shadows in the mirrors. I don't know if I'll ever have the answers. Maybe the shadows were a manifestation of my fears, or maybe they were something more. But what I do know is that I let those fears dictate my choices, and in doing so, I lost something I once held dear. Now I'm left with a question I can't seem to answer. Should I try to go back to Kate and rebuild what we had, or is it better to let go and move on? Part of me wants closure, but another part of me wonders if it's too late. As much as I wanted closure, the idea of going back to Kate felt impossible. Too much had been said and done, and the thought of reopening those wounds scared me more than anything. So I decided to focus on moving forward, even if I wasn't sure where forward would take me. Therapy became a lifeline, helping me sort through the tangled mess of emotions I'd been carrying. I realized that my fear of losing Kate had been as much about losing the life we'd built as it was about losing her. The routine, the familiarity, the shared dreams, it had all felt so permanent. And when it crumbled, it left me feeling adrift. But slowly, piece by piece, I started rebuilding. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects that challenged me and gave me a sense of purpose. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd unintentionally drifted away from during my marriage. They reminded me of who I was before Kate, and being around them felt like rediscovering a part of myself I thought I'd lost. I also started focusing on my own happiness. For years, I had put so much of my energy into our relationship, trying to make Kate happy, that I'd forgotten how to take care of myself. Now, I was learning what it meant to prioritize my own well-being. I picked up hobbies I hadn't touched in years, playing guitar, hiking, even dabbling in photography. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for me. The shadows disappeared completely after a few months. At first, I didn't even notice. They'd been fading so gradually that it was like they were dissolving into the background. When I finally realized they were gone, it felt like a weight had been lifted. Whether they'd been real or not didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I was free from them. Kate reached out a few times after I left. At first, I ignored her calls and messages. I wasn't ready to talk, and I didn't know if I ever would be. But eventually, I responded. We met for coffee one afternoon, and it was less strange. She looked the same, but she felt like a different person. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. We talked, but we didn't fight. She apologized for the things she'd done and admitted that she hadn't been honest with me about everything. She didn't go into detail, and I didn't ask. It felt like opening that door would only lead to more pain. Instead, I told her about the shadows, about the therapy, about how I'd started to heal. She listened quietly, tears in her eyes. And when I finished, she said, "I'm glad you're doing better, Jake. You deserve to be happy." We left it at that. No promises to reconnect, no attempts to rekindle what was lost, just two people saying goodbye, for real this time. Now, as I sit in my new apartment, surrounded by the life I've started to build for myself, I feel a sense of peace. The past will always be a part of me, but it doesn't define me. I've learned that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting and growing. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think about that story. Have a good day, and bye.